Florida Gators see one of their most definitely anticipated and one of their more successful basketball seasons come to a shocking close against the Iowa Hawkeyes. At least in the eyes of some, there are some who say, well, this team was playing close to the edge too many times for far too long, and eventually this was bound to happen anyway. We'll discuss all of that on today's episode of the All Kinds of Weather Forecast. Welcome back to the All Kinds of Weather Forecast. I'm your host, Neil Shulman. He is your co-host, Adrian Perez, also the guy behind Gator Diamond Pod. You can follow him for his stickball analysis at Gator Diamond Pod. You can follow me at All Kinds Weather across all your social handles. The Gators, Adrian, just ran out of steam, I think. We're going to talk about that primarily and their loss to Iowa 73-72 in the round of 32 of the NCAA tournament. Before we get to that, though, let's take a second to shout out our sponsor. We are proudly sponsored by 401k Generation, the wealth management company that helps you invest today for your future tomorrow. Their team of advisors is committed to providing guidance and education for your 401k plan and its participants, and they also offer a range of enrollment solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your company's 401k plan. Whether it's savings for your child's college, investment advice, or even just your retirement, 401k Generation's team of advisors makes getting to know you their top priority. Their advisors will tailor a path to assist you in navigating life's financial milestones and reaching your financial goals. 401k Generation, building stronger futures, one generation at a time. For more information, contact them, 866-998-5879, and visit their website at 401kgeneration.com. All right, Adrian, and it's funny. You and I just sat down at our studios to start recording the show, and immediately we both noticed the other one was wearing black hat, black shirt. We had the same idea that this is a funeral. We are in mourning right now over the death of the 2025-2026 Gator basketball team. There's a lot of places to go with this. There's an old saying that when you have to keep catching up, it catches up with you. Now, this is a very different team than the one a year ago, of course, but nonetheless, Florida under Todd Golden has made a habit of coming back late to force photo finishes in NCAA tournament games. Actually started this ritual 2 years ago against Colorado, got away with it 4 different times last year. UConn, Texas Tech, Auburn, Houston, thanks to Walter Clayton, couldn't get away with it this time without him. Gators found themselves down 51-39, rallied back to take the lead late. Isaiah Brown misses a late free throw, so Florida's only up 2 and not 3. Florida presses, leaves Alvaro Figueroa open. He hits the 3 from the corner. Florida can't even get a shot off. Poetically speaking, not totally unlike Houston in last year's national championship game, and Iowa has the upset 73-72. It is the first time Florida has ever failed to reach the Final Four as a number 1 seed after doing so in 2007, 2014, and 2025. And to some, it is a shocking end to a great season. Adrian, as we start to unpack this loss, just from your perspective, what went wrong in this game?
Well, before I get to that, and I was going to talk about it here, but I'll mention it now that you brought it up. But Astute Alligator on Twitter, he had this little gem there that the last 3 years, excluding the games versus a 16 seed, UF has played 6 tourney games and trailed by 9 or more points in all of them but 1. So that touches base a little bit with what you just said there, right? You keep playing with fire, man. You're going to get burned. Especially
– one was a Maryland team that was embroiled in turmoil as their coach already had 1 foot out the door and the team wasn't ready to play.
Yeah.
That was the one.
And it's especially dangerous when you don't have that get out of jail card free called Walter Clayton Jr., you know? So Florida got burned. But you know what, Neil? That's just the nature of March Madness, man. We've had tough losses in the tournament, but we've had some exhilarating moments too. We've had championships. We've had buzzer beaters ourselves, Chioza, Mike Miller. I mean, we've had the heartbreakers, right? Like, the losses to Butler, the loss to Louisville, the loss to South Carolina in the Elite Eight. Those are all heartbreakers, but that's just the nature of March Madness. And you got to be willing, right, as a coach, as a player, and as a fan base, you got to be willing to leave yourself open to that type of disappointment to hopefully get the rewards, the riches of the championships, which fortunately for us, unlike a lot of these fan bases that have tried to troll you on social media and all Gator fans, we've experienced the epitome in college basketball more than once, more than twice. So, what left the frustration for Gator Nation this season, though, was that, and it's a term that I've used
Meat on
on
the
the
bone,
baseball
right?
diamond, right? Little meat left on the bone, man. You knew exactly where I was going with this, and we don't even talk about this.
I
This
know you.
season, yeah, this season just felt like, there was more to it. This was a premature exit from the tournament, no doubt about it. And it was a big upset. And usually, when it's a big upset like this, the team that was favored, the better team, had to contribute to it, and Florida contributed to it, man. I was gonna ask you, man. I don't know if we peaked a little early. I think we might have peaked there towards the latter end part of the season. Um, when you're beating teams by 30 plus points, okay, SEC teams that are still in the tournament right now in the Sweet 16, Florida's demolishing them by 30 plus points. That's peaking. That's playing at your peak right there. And I just don't think that they were able to carry that over into the tournament. Sure, Friday night felt great. It felt like a party in there, man. I was there with you. That felt like a party. I don't know if maybe that also contributed to the performance yesterday, because Friday night, obviously a 16 seed, and that felt great. But other than that, the last 2 or 3 games, they started to, not the wheels come off, but it started to wobble a little bit, right? And it culminated obviously in that loss to Vanderbilt, and then obviously in what happened yesterday. But as far as the game goes, Neil, listen, flat out, Iowa just executed better than Florida throughout the entire game. And in the first half, you are dependent on your front court. That's the strength of your team. And when your front court, honestly really didn't show up until the latter parts of that ball game. And when you look at some of these stats, Neil, I mean, it's all right there for you, okay? Rebounds. We've talked about that throughout the year. As long as Florida bludgeons teams on the boards, they're going to beat anybody they play, okay? And in this game, it was even 27 boards apiece. Okay. In offensive rebounds, Iowa actually had a 10-9 advantage. In points in the paint, Iowa 32-30 advantage. In second chance points, Iowa a 7-6 advantage. And everybody was talking about Iowa slowing down the pace and all that, which they did, but yet they had more fast break points, Neil. They had 9 fast break points to Florida 7. So I don't know if it was coaching. I don't know if the team just wasn't felt the pressure of repeating, but they just didn't have that performance that they have had throughout the season there towards the latter parts of the ball game, and it culminated obviously in this game. And then if I told you, man, Neil, that this was going to be the stat line of Ruben Chinyelu, 20 minutes basically, 4 fouls, 0 points, and 1 rebound, you would have said that's impossible. That is impossible. And yet that was Ruben's stat line, and man, we saw his father at the game Friday. His dad was proud as could be of his son, and he should be. And Ruben, I mean, no one amplifies what it is to be a Gator than him. He loves being a Gator, but damn, man, and at that moment, man, he just did not have the ball game. And the team depended on him down low. The team had gotten to a point where a double-double from Ruben was kind of like money in the bank. And when that wasn't there, not even nowhere near that, okay, it became trouble. And yet you still had a chance. And you really should have technically won this game at the end, when really, when you look at those stats that I just talked about, you should not have been in this ball game, Neil.
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking a much more macro view of this game than I think you are. I mean, you're not wrong in anything you said. Florida had their chances to win despite Ruben Chinyelu basically being a ghost in this game. Like you said, Ruben Chinyelu producing a double-double. You call it money in the bank. I call it expected income, like recurring monthly revenue, whatever the phrase you want to use here. It's something that you've come to expect enough that you can plan the rest of your game around that working in your favor. And then it just doesn't happen. And you find yourself down 51-39. Well, Florida did themselves no favors in this game. Like there's a lot of stuff you can say about the refs, about Alvaro Figueroa. How do you pronounce his name? You're the Latino here. His last name.
What's the spelling?
Fulgaris. I know how it was spelled. Alvaro Fulgaris. I mean, I watched him play a little bit at Robert Morris randomly for reasons that don't apply to Florida. But I saw him play at Robert Morris a little while ago, and then saw him come to Iowa. I'm like, oh, I remember that name. Then, of course, he gets famous among Gator Nation for trying to punch Alex Condon, or so Iowa fans will say, that Condon wrestled him to the ground and he was the victim of that, whatever. They were involved in a scuffle and Florida fans are booing him in the arena and all that. And then later on in the game, he gets famous for another reason because he hits that three that winds up being the game winner. So that brings us to the fact that Florida did botch the end of game sequence in this game. I think we can talk about that in a second. Florida also missed 7 free throws, 20 from 27 from the free throw line. At least 2 of those, if not 3, this is from my memory, so I could be wrong on this, but at least 2 for sure, possibly 3 of those were the front ends of 1-and-1s. So that's leaving multiple points at the line in multiple situations there. Florida also turning the ball over 11 times, which in the average game isn't abhorrent, but it's also still not good. Then you take that down from the average game to, well, you're playing a team that's number 357 out of 365 teams in adjusted tempo on KenPom, which means the number of possessions they get per 40 minutes, which means they slow the game down to a crawl, which means you're not going to get as many possessions as you usually get, which means every possession you do get is more magnified, which means that every turnover you commit hurts worse than it would in an average game. So Florida knew that coming into this game and either didn't prepare for the Iowa slow tempo correctly, they didn't prepare for their press correctly, or they just ignored the warning signs. I don't know. I'm not in those rooms in practice, but clearly Florida did not value the basketball as much as they should have. There were some lazy passes. Boogie Flynn at one point just flung the ball out of bounds right to the Iowa bench. Like stuff like that, you just can't have in any situation. The unforced turnovers that just hand possessions over to the other team. And again, those become more painful when you're playing a team like Iowa that limits the number of times you do get the ball in a game. So to me, the last play of the game is almost never the only thing that decides the game, but it's what everyone's talking about. So let's talk about it here. The strategy of fouling up 2. So long ago, before we even had this podcast and in all kinds of weather, it was just a website with some social media handles to tweet the links to the website's articles on. I wrote about the strategy of fouling up 3, and then another piece I put out on the strategy of fouling up 2 within days of each other. Very different strategies, obviously. I personally do believe in fouling up 3 because then, assuming you don't commit the cardinal sin of fouling the guy in the act of shooting, you cannot lose the game. 2 free throws, obviously, if he makes both, you're still up 1. The absolute worst case scenario is he makes the first and intentionally misses the second, and then you've got 4-on-2 for the rebound, 4 of your guys versus 2 of the opponents. Your 2 guys, obviously the defense on the free throw line is closer to the rim, so they have all the advantages in the world, both from a numbers and proximity to the basket standpoint, or I guess if you want to include the shooter, it's 4-on-3. But regardless, you've got a numbers advantage and a proximity advantage to the hoop. All you have to do if he's going to intentionally miss the second is just get the ball touched with a fingertip and the clock starts. And then just hold on to it or just let it roll on the ground and make it a scrummy mess till the clock runs out. You can do that if they're going to do the helter-skelter thing of making the first and intentionally missing the second and try to get a rebound. And I talked about this in no shortage of detail. It is a decade ago now, 9 years ago, when my man Mid-Major Mike refused to do this against Zach Showalter in the Sweet 16 against Wisconsin in 2017. What happens? Zach Showalter hits the three. We go to overtime in that game. It should never have gotten to that point. If you watch the game on TV, you'll remember he did the discount double check thing because Aaron Rodgers was in the audience, and he was playing for the Packers then, so he was rooting for the Badgers, and Showalter does this big thing, and everyone's cheering and laughing and loving it, and it never should have gotten to that point because White should have fouled up 3. So why do I bring that up? And he did it again against Virginia Tech, by the way. Clearly didn't learn his lesson. One of the reasons why I can't stand the guy, because he didn't learn anything, and 4 years later against Virginia Tech, the same thing happens. So why do I bring that up now? Because Florida was up 2, not 3. So why do I bring that up? Because the likelihood of getting burned by the strategy of fouling with that late lead increases dramatically when you're up by 2 and not by 3. Because the idea up 2 changes from the idea up 3. With a 3-point lead, the idea is they cannot even tie you, and now you have to just play keep away with the basketball. You don't need to draw anything crazy up to get a last-second shot. You just need to inbound the ball, touch the ball, and then hit free throws if they're able to catch you and foul you. There's no real X's and O's draw play up in the dirt kind of thing you've got to do as a coach when you're up 3. When you're up 2, it's a lot more dangerous because then not only do you have to inbound the ball, not only do you have to advance it all the way up the court, because this is not the NBA. You cannot call a timeout to advance the ball like you can in the pros. So you've got to inbound the ball, get it across half court. Someone's got to set a screen or cut or do something to get open for a shot so you have the last shot, so you have the chance to win the game. Not the case up 3. All you got to do is keep the ball away, make your free throws. Here you've got to scheme something up for yourself, assuming the guy hits both free throws, of course. Now, I understand the thinking from Todd Golden. The idea is we want to get the last shot. That's the other side of the argument here. We want the ball last. So we're going to force them to shoot 2 free throws. So I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it. But Florida just did not execute the strategy at all. And what happened was we saw the press is broken. I don't know why you're going to press if you're not going to foul immediately, or maybe they tried and they just didn't even come close to actually committing the foul. But in any case, they break the press. Fulgaris is open for the 3. He hits it. We all know what happens next. Xavier Lee drives, doesn't get it to go, doesn't even get a shot up. And that's the end of that. So again, I disagree with the strategy from Golden. I do understand the thinking, but it was executed horrendously, so much so that we never even had the chance to really even see it play out. We never had the chance to see Florida even get to play out Golden's thought process to fruition. And of course, the 3 is hit and we lose the game. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on fouling up 2?
Look, man, Todd Golden is a national championship winning coach. Okay. You just spent about 10 minutes talking about the strategy of fouling up 2. But in that 10-minute explanation, I think you buried the lead. Why, if you were going to foul, if that was the strategy from the get, why are you pressing? If the strategy is to foul, you'll have everybody like at the half court line.
Yep.
Let the ball come into play. You burn about 2 to 3 seconds while they get to you, and then you foul. So the FBI calls that a clue, okay? And you buried that somewhere in your explanation there. You actually questioned it. I don't think that was the strategy, man. I think Todd Golden just said that there at the presser, I guess, just to kind of, he got a little defensive. And he said that when he doesn't need to. Do you know why he doesn't need to? Because he's got a ring that says he's a national championship coach. That's why he doesn't need to get defensive. He should have just said the truth probably, man. Listen, I decided to call a press. The guy beat it, and they beat us, and that's it. Hats off to him. They made the play. That's what he should have just said. I don't buy the fouling up 2, okay? I don't buy it because what I saw on the court doesn't tell me that that's what they were going to do, okay? When you have a press and you got Boogie Trail in there, Sturts, That's not fouling up too. And the strategy is questionable, to say the least, which you explained there properly. Okay, so I've heard three explanations already for that defensive set. Obviously, the first one was it was a press, which obviously that got criticized heavily by people who know basketball a whole lot more than me. Okay, on Twitter, Charles Barkley, all these guys who really know this sport. Neil Blackman on Florida Basketball Hour that I respect tremendously. To press there with the lead, what's that other guy?
Eric
Goff,
Foster. Those two guys.
Gottfried. No,
Eric,
but also on ESPN. Basically, you have the lead. You have the lead. The one thing that could beat you is a three-pointer, and that's what you give up potentially when you press. You're kind of almost making it easy for them to run a break on you, which is what Charles Barkley says. And when they run a break on you, chances are you're going to give up an open three, right? Because Tommy had to come in. He had to make that decision, and he went to Sturts, and then that left the guy open in the corner for the open three. And that was the only thing that could beat you. Only thing that could beat you was a three-pointer at that time. So I just think it was a bad decision. It's something that Todd's going to learn from. Okay. Oh, and also today, I also read that Boogie said that the plan was to trail and let the corners open, but to trail Sturts and not let Sturts take the shot. So that Boogie said that was the plan. So that's like, I just think that Todd got a little defensive, and he said that about the follow-up too, but I don't think that was the plan, dude. So and he doesn't have to get defensive, man. He doesn't have to. He's a national championship winning coach.
If the plan really was to press, I don't totally hate that because of what I said a minute ago about their adjusted tempo, because they do love to play such a slow pace, and you're forcing them to do the exact opposite of what their DNA is in the most critical juncture of the game. The problem with it is you need like two center fielders, basically. You need it in football. You need two free safeties roaming to guard the corners or to stand, like if you're doing a horn set, the two middle guys like on the wings, like the 45-degree angles. You need two of those guys. You didn't have that. You need three guys to press in the backcourt, and you need two guys to watch both sides of the three-point line. That's not what happened.
One of the flaws was that we had somebody on the ball.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Maybe you don't have that guy on the ball. You have him out by the three-point line, and now Tommy is not put in the decision to make that choice. Now you have that extra body back there to take not only Sturts coming down with a full head of steam, but also to take the wing. So it was designed poorly. I know Todd is killing himself right now. He probably didn't sleep a wink last night, but we all have to remember he's a young coach, man. He's a young coach, and he's going to be a great one, but he's a young coach, and he's a national championship winning young coach, but a young coach nonetheless. And this is experience for him also, man. He's not going to get them all right, bro. He's not going to get them all right. This one, he didn't get right. And it's pretty obvious. But
I mean, no coach is going to bat 1,000. The idea is to have your highest batting average in the postseason. If you're gonna overthink things or outsmart yourself, then you do it in regular season games against Vanderbilt or the early season tournaments that we love to go to, or the UConn game would have been a great time to overthink yourself. You lose that game, all right, whatever. Probably not going to enjoy walking out of MSG with the UConn fans doing the Gator chomp at me. Whatever. You learn from it. It's not the most consequential loss you can take. You're going to be better for it in the tournament. To have a tournament game end because you outthought yourself or you outsmarted yourself, that's what stings. And again, I'm going to point right back to the fact that Florida turned the ball over 11 times. Florida missed 7 free throws, including multiple front ends of 1-and-1. Florida just did not feel like they were in sync in this game. And it should not have ever come down to the last possession of the game. Florida was favored by 10.5 points in this game for a reason. Like, that's not a mistake. But, well, go ahead.
How about all of the bunnies? We missed bunnies and layups like crazy,
sure.
Man.
Sure. So that's another, and that strengthens my point even more. Florida does too much in this game. Florida does too much in this game to hurt themselves for me to really feel too bad about the end of game situation. Like, if Florida plays a fantastic game and Iowa just shoots ridiculous from three, like let's say Iowa shoots 80% from three for 40 minutes, which is almost impossible. But let's say that that's what happens, and Florida plays well, and something happens at the end of the game. It couldn't be this, because if Iowa was shooting 80% from three, the strategy would be different. But something happens at the end where Todd Golden overthinks things and he outsmarts himself and costs Florida the game. Then you can kind of say, all right, that's kind of bad. Like, Todd, you gotta get a handle on this. But looking at the way this game played out, this never should have even come down to this. This game never should have gotten to an end of game sequence that had us biting our nails. It never should have even been a close game. Again, if Florida just plays an average game, if Florida makes their layups, if Florida makes some of their free throws that they missed, the front ends of 1-and-1s is a good place to start. And if Florida wins the rebounding battle the way that they've been doing for most of the season, I don't want to say that this is a complete blowout, maybe not a laugher, but Florida wins the game by double digits. Florida can win this game by 10, 15, maybe even 20 points, but it's not what happened. Florida lost this game. Their season is done, as is the career of Thomas Houck. It's not official yet, but there's no objective reason to think that he's coming back. So for all intents and purposes, this is the end of the road for him. Thus leads us into the next question of where this ranks, Adrian, in Gator history. And we can go all sports here. We can not just basketball. Where does this rank in the most devastating losses? And I say devastating, not embarrassing. Like, embarrassing being Georgia Southern or South Florida. Like, those are just embarrassing, not devastating. The most devastating, consequential, painful losses in Florida history. Where does this rank to you, knowing that it very likely ended the career of Thomas Houck?
Yeah, I'm going to go old school. I'm going to go 2 games, 2 football games, both that I was at, okay? The first one, I mean, you weren't even born yet, I don't think. 1994? When were you born?
I was born in March of 94, so I was an infant. I was about 8 months old when that choke at Doak happened.
No, not even that one. October 15th, and old school Gators know this.
Auburn.
October 15th, 1994, in the swamp. Number 6 Auburn comes into the swamp. Number 1 Florida. Florida had a 17 home game winning streak. And Auburn comes in on probation. They're not even eligible for the SEC that season because of violation. So they're on probation. So the regular season is going to be all they have. And it was a great game. I was about 5 rows up in the end zone. I believe the west end zone right there, student at that time. And Florida goes up, 33-29 on it was a back and forth game. It was like 6 lead changes. Florida goes up 33-29 on a Danny Warfield to Jack Jackson bomb with like 5 minutes left. We end up getting the ball back with like 2 minutes left. Spurrier's way of running out the clock was just let Danny throw it. He wasn't into running out the clock the old-fashioned way. But Danny throws a pick. He throws a pick with like 1:30 at around the 50-something yard line. And Patrick Nix, Bo Nix's dad, drives down to my end zone where I'm at. And with like about 8 seconds left, something like that, he throws a ball to the corner of the end zone. Frank Sanders, before Randy Moss. I guess Randy Moss was already at Florida State, but the term mossing didn't exist yet. So Frank Sanders mosses Michael Gilmer, who became a great doctor from what I read. But as far as the safety goes in the SEC, he got mossed by Frank Sanders, and they won the game. End of the 17-game win streak right there. end of the perfect season. That was the same year, obviously, that you touched upon it, in which then the choke-a-doke took place. I was at that game also, the choke-a-doke. And then we ended up playing Florida State in the Sugar Bowl and ended up losing. So we ended up going 10-2-1. We did win the SEC. We beat Bama in the SEC championship game. But that Auburn game, that team was stacked, right? That Florida team, it was going to be a national championship team. That Auburn loss kind of, got us. Back then, you got one loss, you were pretty much out of it. It was only the top two teams going to the national championship. They had to be voted in and all that good stuff back in that day. So that's my first one. All right. That Auburn, because I was right there, man. That was a heartbreaker. And then the other one for me is the Tennessee 2001, the 9/11 game. Okay. That was the season that the Tennessee game was taking place the week of 9/11. It was canceled. Obviously, there was no college football on that Saturday. I believe 9/11 fell on a Tuesday or something to that effect, Tuesday, Wednesday. So then they rescheduled it to the end of the year. Obviously, we had to beat Tennessee. We were going to be playing we were going to have LSU in the championship game, in the SEC championship game that we had already blown out LSU. And then it was going to be the Miami team for the national championship. That Miami team with Ken Dorsey, Andre Johnson, all those NFLers, Ed Reed and all that. It was going to be an unbelievable football game. Unfortunately, Tennessee beat us in the swamp. I was at that game too. Tennessee at the beginning of the year was not a very good football team. All right. They had a new quarterback, Casey Clausen. They got better as the year went on, and they ended up beating us in the swamp. If we play on the week of 9/11, that doesn't take place. If that never happened and they end up playing, Florida blows them out easily. Okay. Tennessee was a bad football team at the beginning of that season, but they got a lot better. So those are the two that came to mind as soon as you sent me that to think about a couple of things. Those are the two that came to mind immediately for me, man.
So I'm going to take a very different approach here. This was a topic that I figured a lot of Gator fans would be talking about. And it's something that maybe when you're in a relatively somber mood, maybe like on a quiet night on the porch and you just got to pass time and maybe you've talked about the best Gator wins ever, but the fire kind of dying. And as you're kind of winding down your night, you just decide, all right, let's go the other way. What are the worst losses, the most painful losses in Gator history? Adrian, this might shock you, but like I said, something about this team just didn't feel right. And I said even in the pre-NCAA tournament show that we did, watch out for Bennett Starks in Iowa. This is not a joke of an opponent. They could very easily off us in Tampa before we even get to Houston to face that team in that road game that we've been decrying. Something about this team going all the way back to the Arizona game and even throughout the season, the home loss to Auburn, the loss at TCU, like stuff like that, just something's not right. And then you go on the run in the SEC and you win all those games. And then Kentucky, you get them twice in a row. You beat them twice in a row. Something still doesn't quite feel right. Vanderbilt blows us out. That should have been a warning sign. It wasn't. So looking at those last three games, even if you throw out the rest of the season for Florida, the last three games before the NCAA tournament for Florida were pretty ominous. They were very strong bits of foreshadowing for what was going to happen in hindsight, of course. So why do I bring all this up? Because, Adrian, this is not hyperbole. I genuinely don't think that this loss to Iowa was in the top 30 most devastating losses for Florida this century. Forgetting the 90s, forgetting, not even counting the fiasco bowl against Nebraska, not even counting the choke at Doak, not even counting the loss to Georgia in 97 or the loss to Georgia in 66, the reason that Steve Spurrier hates Georgia. Forgetting all that, just 2000 and on. This is off the top of my head too, because I just got home from Tampa, recording this late. So off the top of my head, 2000, the Mateen-Cleaves game, the national championship game. That's for national championships. That's more devastating.
The Flintstones. Flintstones.
Yep. There's the Natty against Michigan State in 2000. There's Tennessee draining the swamp, the game that you mentioned in 2001. There's a double overtime loss to Creighton in 2002 in basketball. There's the 2004 basketball game against Manhattan in North Carolina that Billy Donovan loses. Then we'll go baseball. This is far more devastating to me. The championship series loss to Texas was bad because that was Florida's first time ever there. You're thinking, oh, this is a magical ride. We're finally going to – nope. And then Creighton and Manhattan are humongous upsets too. Those are against major schools. There's no real star like a Bennett Sturz on either of those two teams to beat Florida. So those hurt worse to me. We can go to football now. 2007, there were a bunch of losses that were devastating. There was Auburn with Wes Byram doing the chomp in our face. And when we think we have natty inspiration or we have natty goals or reservations that year, Georgia beating us, the dunce revolution they pull in the end zone, that was worse. The Southern Miss in 2009, the baseball super regional where we think we've got it made for a return back to Omaha. Southern Miss walks into our stadium and sweeps us. That was worse. Both those games were worse. The softball, the national championship series against Washington with Daniel Laurie, that was worse because that was also for a natty. 2009 SEC championship game against Alabama was worse. 2010, the College World Series that Florida's in because they finally make it back after getting swept by USM in the Supers. Now they're in Omaha. They're not ready for the moment. UCLA and FSU 1-2 punch them out of Omaha. That was worse. Getting bounced out of Omaha by your arch rival in FSU, that hurts worse. Back to basketball, the Elite Eight 2011 against Butler where you have a huge lead. You can't win the game. You just can't close out Shelvin Mack. That was worse because that was for a trip to the Final Four. 2011, also in softball, there was the Dallas Escobedo series. Again, for a national championship, you're facing them for the natty. You lose that. That was worse. 2011 Men's College World Series, the entire championship series against South Carolina. Both of those games hurt worse. Basketball, 2012, now Louisville, you have an 11-point lead with 9 minutes to go and you blow that. Again, trip to the Final Four on the line. That hurts worse. There's a lacrosse game in here that hurts me worse because I had a friend who played on that team. Molly Stevens was a freshman on that team. Google, if you want, Google Alyssa Murray stick check. There's some real officials malpractice in this game. That was worse because that was for a trip to the lacrosse Final Four. That hurt worse. 2012, the World Series, South Carolina, and then Kent freaking State knocks us out. That's worse. 2012 football, Georgia. That's worse because we have natty reservations again that year. Probably still make it if Stephon Taylor of Stanford is called for or is given a touchdown in that game against Notre Dame, even with that loss. That's worse. Then the Elite Eight against Michigan, we just get blown out. The year after that, UConn knocks us out of the Final Four with our number one ranked team in the country that won 30 straight games. Those are both worse because there was, again, that's a national quarterfinal, a national semifinal. Those are worse. Adrian, we're still not done. This may not even be in the top 50. 2015, baseball, the World Series, Virginia. What was it? Spores? Was his name Joshua Spores? Just making us look like a middle school team. That hurt worse because that team was so loaded and they just couldn't get over the Virginia hump that year. So that was worse. 2016, getting knocked out of Omaha again as a number one overall seed by Texas Tech. Worse. 2018, Arkansas knocks you out. That's worse. 2019, Georgia in football. We haven't even gotten to the most recent ones yet. How about the cleat toss from Marco Wilson against LSU? That was more devastating because Florida, again, had reservations for the CFP. That didn't happen. That hurt worse. The championship game against Alabama the week after that, that was worse. The tennis Elite Eight with Ben Shelton. You have Ben freaking Shelton, who's a superstar on the pro circuit right now. You think, oh, we've got a literal pro tennis player on our team right now. Surely we can win a natty. No, Virginia knocks us out in the Elite Eight. That was worse. Omaha, I was there in 2023. That was worse than this. That was for a natty. If Wyatt Langford's ball goes 5 feet farther, Florida's got a second ring on its finger. 24, the Women's College World Series against Oklahoma. The goodbye to Skylar Wallace. That was worse. And then, of course, the goodbye to Jack Caglione where A&M beats us because we're on borrowed time, granted. But still, to say goodbye to Jack Caglione in the Final Four of college baseball, that was worse. Was that 50, Adrian? Are we approaching it? I can name more and more games that were all more painful than this one. because, again, watching this team throughout the course of the season, yes, they got hot in February, but going back to the last 3 games before the NCAA tournament, again, something just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like this team had that destiny on its side the way they did a year ago. So this one is probably like in the next 50 most devastating losses, like the 51 to 100 range. Like with this one is on par with the 2014 baseball regional where Long Beach State and then my new local team, College of Charleston, sweeps you out of your own regional. Or actually, I had that order reversed, but that it's probably on par with that, or like an Oral Roberts a couple years ago where you've got that huge lead late and you blow that because mid-major Mike doesn't know how to finish a game either. Maybe like the Oklahoma baseball regional in 2022. Maybe the Miami football game and the one in the swamp where you have all this offseason hype and it's Mario versus Billy hired at the same time. Now they're going head to head and you just get embarrassed. So like those games are all in the like 51 to 100 range for most painful losses. That's about where this one sits. That's the company that this one has for me. It's not even close to the most devastating loss, just because we saw this team's limitations on display for most of the year, even when they were winning. Even when they won games, you still saw the limitations there. And it was only destined to end one way, and maybe sooner than we thought, but it did end exactly how we thought, Adrian.
For me, it's a lot higher, and it's simply just because I can't say this for all those other teams, and I'm sure for some of them, obviously. And I don't have quite the memory you do, that's for darn sure. But for me anyways, this team at its finest is a national championship team. So that's why it's a little bit more, I won't say devastating, but that's why it's a little bit more in the, it kind of hurts category, because this team, and I think that I said it to either you or to Dustin before the Prairie View game started, with the whole atmosphere and everything. I just turned to one of you and I go, man, as long as this team brings it every night for 6 more nights, we're national back-to-back again. And there's no team in college basketball right now that would have beaten this Florida team if they brought it every night. No team. I don't know if I could say that about all those other teams that you just mentioned there. I'm sure some of them for sure, but not all of them. That's for sure.
Here's the question, Adrian. How often? I mean, you could say that about last year's baseball team. The team that goes 1-2 in the freaking Myrtle Beach regional. Well, they go into Texas and take down the number 1 team in the country 2 out of 3. So you could say, well, when they're at their finest, they could be national champions. The problem
but at that time, they were a shell of themselves with all the injuries. This team had no injuries, was at its peak, everybody healthy, everybody good to go. They just throughout the year, there was just these moments where they had these games in which there were no-shows, like the stats that I just showed you.
That's what I'm getting at.
And if you brought it in, not the first game, you could have been a no-show Friday and been fine.
Yeah.
But with Iowa, both of us on the preview show were hoping Clemson had won that game.
Yep.
Okay, we were both open when we previewed it that Clemson wins this game. We both picked Iowa to beat Clemson, but we were hoping Clemson won because we both knew Iowa presented issues, And so they had to start bringing their A game in the round of 32, and they didn't, and they lost. But if they had brought their A game, nobody in college basketball would have touched them. Nobody, man. Not even like last year.
Nobody is going to make a rational argument to you, especially given your propensity for, your love of baseball. No one's going to go up to you and say, Adrian, 2025 Gator baseball should have been national champions. The point of bringing that up was that Florida baseball last year had a stretch where they looked pretty freaking good. They didn't start great like this Gator basketball team, but when you go from 1-11 to 15-5 in the SEC, that means that you during the second half plus of the SEC schedule, go 14-4 in the best conference in college baseball. So you could also make the case that when this Gator baseball team was at its best, they could be challenging for the national championship. They ran out of steam. They didn't have the ability to continue it on into Myrtle Beach, but when they were playing their best ball, they looked pretty damn unbeatable. as did this Florida basketball team. Now, there were not the injuries, like you mentioned. There were not the injuries on this basketball team. But that makes it almost worse for this basketball team because they had no excuse not to be playing their best brand of ball for most of the season. Yes, there's going to be a learning curve. Xavier Lee and Boogie Flander new, Thomas Houck stepping in a new position, and he actually had the smallest learning curve of all, if there was any at all for him. But yeah, there's going to be some painful growing moments in the first month or so of the season. But then how do you explain the last 3 games before March Madness? How do you explain Kentucky making you really look pedestrian? They're not great either, nor is Vanderbilt. Those teams also, by the way, losing in the round of 32, just like you did. And you go 2-1 against those 3 teams with your 2 wins being close and very, very easily could have turned the other way at a set of moments here or there throughout those games. And you get blown out in your 1 loss. So what am I supposed to make of that?
Yeah. You know what also makes it a little painful too is some of these guys, man. I mean, Tommy Hawk, Condon, Hang Lockton, especially Kondo and Tommy. Those guys are recruits, unheralded. What were they? Barely even 3 stars, maybe? Yeah. And to have turned out to what they are and the type of people that they are, you really would have wanted them to have succeeded. You really would have wanted to have seen Micah hold up that championship trophy one more time, right? He deserved it, So, some of these guys on that team, also makes you want to have man, I wish that they had God in it. Hey, Neil, before we skip out on this subject and we move on, I'll be remiss if I don't talk about the 2 guards real quick, man, because a lot of people have wanted to come down on them throughout the whole year, and they want to come down on them during this game. And let me just tell you real quick, Boogie Flan, I remember telling you on Friday when that game was out of hand, I go, Todd better sit down Boogie quick. I need him to rest as much as possible so he could, stick to Sturts, right? I told you that Friday. And you know what? If I had told you, Neil, on Friday, hey, man, Sturts on Sunday against Florida is going to have 40 minutes. He did not take 1 second off. He played 40 minutes. 13 points, 0 for 9 on 3-pointers. 5 for 16 to get those 13 points, okay? That was Boogie Flan's lockdown defense on him right there, okay? So that's what Boogie Flan brought to the table. Xavier Lee, everybody wants to talk about that last play. Yeah, he probably could have gone up for the shot, and I think he gets fouled, and I think he probably puts the game away at the free throw line maybe, okay? But guess what? He got you to that point. Okay, Lee had 17 points, went 3 for 6 from 3. All right, 50%. Without Lee, we aren't even at that stage because he had to make up for what the front court didn't bring to the table, right? The money in the bank, Lee had to put some extra deposits in there. Okay, so Lee and Boogie, they played good, man. They had good games, and people wanted to, put a little bit of the blame on them. But I think that's unfounded, man. Those 2 guys played good.
I mean, we said it all year long. I said it before the year even. And I think you said the same thing too throughout the year too. Florida last year won a title because their backcourt carried them and their front court did just enough to win games and more particularly not lose them so that Walter Clayton and Will Richard and Elijah Martin could all just take over whenever the time came for them to do so. This year, it was reversed. Nobody in their right mind ever expected either Boogie Flan or Xavier Lee. For all you want to say about, well, we paid Boogie $2 million, I don't care about that. They were never going to replace those guards that we lost a year ago. The formula for this year's team to succeed was always going to be the front court carries you with Chinyelu, Houck, and Condon, and Micah Hanlockton even getting you the boards and the easy putbacks, and the backcourt, the guys like Urban Klavjar and later Zay Brown. But then also, of course, the 2 guys you bring in, Xavier Lee from Princeton and Boogie Flan from Arkansas, those guys doing just enough to supplement what the big guys do down low. There's a saying that guard play wins you games in March. I've not always been the biggest believer in that. I just think that the team that executes the best and whatever they do wins the games in March. But we're not going to know that now because Florida got 0 from Ruben Chinyelu in this game. Urban Klavjar didn't have a terrible game, but he wasn't able to step up and deliver a huge point total. Exactly 5 points for Florida. Isaiah Brown had 3 points in this game for Florida. Xavier Lee, the guard, has 17. Boogie Fland, just 7. You needed more than that. But Florida won plenty of games this year against NCAA tournament teams with just their bigs. Before the guards came into their own, before Xavier Lee really figured out how to play SEC basketball, there was a learning curve there for him, as we talked about. He was struggling early on the year. Florida was competing with the Dukes, the UConns, the Arizona, and they were winning some games against decent teams even as the year goes along because their big guys are just dominating in the paint. But as you pointed out, the 0 from Chindilu on the scoreboard, and then the fact that we managed to only battle Iowa to a draw on the boards, that's just not going to get the job done. So this wasn't even a case of Florida didn't have the guards. Florida didn't do what it did well all year long in this game. An even average game from its front court wins this game for Florida.
Iowa was undersized, man. I mean, their tallest guy was 6'9".
Yeah.
And they were bringing, the guy off the bench, the guy who hit the game winner was like 6'10", I think. But as far as their starting unit goes, it was 6'7" to 6'9". That was their bigs. And when you got 0 from Ruben, but not only Ruben, but when he gets in foul trouble, then Micah really spelled him for 10 minutes and he gave you 0, right? And Micah just gave you 2 boards. Ruben just gave you 1 board. So basically 40 minutes of basketball from those 2 guys, 30 plus, gave you 0 points and 3 boards against an undersized front line in Iowa. That you could say that was the ball game right there. Have that.
And as is the case with the 11 turnovers and the missed free throws, and then of course the end of game situation that we talked about. All right, so let's put a bow on this. Adrian, it was a good team. And we said it after the Auburn loss, which feels like years ago now. But after the Auburn loss, we both said the same thing. This is a good team for Florida. It's not a great one. That turns out to be the perfect eulogy for them. Now, a lot's transpired since then. Florida has, to your point earlier, they have looked like a team capable of playing for a national championship and winning a national championship, but not consistently enough against the top-tier teams. No one's impressed by you blowing out Mississippi State. Like, that just doesn't – or Georgia, for that matter. If you saw what St. Louis did to them in the round of 64, mid-major Mike can't win his first-round games anymore. But Florida just didn't do it consistently enough against the top-tier teams. And when they were beating the top-tier teams, they were doing so because they got the big games from their big guys. They just didn't have that in this game. Again, you have to catch up enough times. It's going to catch up with you. And there were some fun memories. This team won the SEC. It is a championship, so you do add that number to the Raptors in the O-Dome. It was not a complete waste of a season, but like you've said all along, a lot of meat left on the bone. And yet it's not all that surprising to see this team finish the year with a lot of meat left on that bone because of what we saw throughout the year. All right, Adrian, let's talk real quick about another sport that's been kind of depressing that we're going to be talking about more later this week, but Gator baseball. We'll talk about this more on the Gator Diamond Pod, but just for those who don't want to wait for that to come out, this took a back seat because it was happening at the same time as the NCAA basketball tournament, but things got really ugly in Tuscaloosa, Florida, starting out the SEC schedule 3-0, thinking, all right, well, High Point was kind of bad, but well, all right, 3-0 in the SEC, we're going to be fine. We still have all those problems that you've pointed out, the defense, the pitching, and well, now the hitting isn't really showing up for Florida. So a no-hitter on Friday night was the low light for Florida, but Give us a sense of what we can expect on the next Gator Diamond Pod.
Well, I guess we're going to discuss, obviously, the series and what kind of transpired out there in Tuscaloosa. A lot of bad stuff for Florida baseball. First no-hitter in like almost 100 years. I don't know, man. Crazy stuff. You get no-hit in college baseball. It's pretty rare, much less a solo no-hitter. A lot of times these no-hitters in college baseball, it's like, 3-4 pitchers because, college baseball kids, aren't too efficient with their pitch count and stuff like that. this kid pitched 130 pitches when it was all said and done. So they let him go out there and get that no-hitter. So started off awful. That's not how you want to start a series on a Friday, and it pretty much went downhill from there, believe it or not. They were in position to salvage the game on Sunday, and then on Sunday, uncharacteristically, the strongest part, just like the front line for Florida basketball, the strongest part of this Florida baseball team has been the bullpen. And Sully had it set up perfectly. He had a 4-run lead, and he handed it over to the bullpen in the fifth inning with 1 out. And they go on to give up like 14 runs, So they got swept. They got swept, and it got ugly there on Sunday, man. Alabama had a good time. They had a good time at Florida's expense. And now Florida's got to regroup. They got a tough week ahead. By the time this show comes out, the one that we're doing right now, it'll be, I guess, Tuesday morning when this comes out. So on Tuesday today, later on today, Florida will be taking on Florida State in Jacksonville, the second game of that 3 games in the midweek. So they have a chance to win the series against Florida State, but by no means is it going to be easy. Florida State just got into the top 10. Florida fell out of the top 25 of all the major rankings. And then they got to go to Arkansas. Okay, a very difficult place, Fayetteville. Arkansas is in the top 5 in the nation right now. So they're going to have 4 very, very tough games this week. We're going to preview that. We're going to talk a little bit about Sully's comments that he made post-game on Sunday. Sully didn't hold back. He didn't hold back about what he feels is, to put it mildly, a lack of leadership on this team. Made some really, really hard comments about he doesn't feel the need to have to bring pom-poms to the ballpark to motivate his players. They should be able to motivate themselves and hold themselves accountable for that. So he made some harsh comments on that, and it's stuff that I've talked about. I've talked about on X. I've talked about on Gator Diamond Pods prior. This team just doesn't have those guys that you could go to a practice and within the first 10 minutes you could say, yeah, that dude right there is one of the leaders of this team. That dude right there, who's that, number 15, BT Riotfeld? Yeah, that guy's a leader. Josh Rivera, that guy's a leader. Yeah. Kobe Holter, that guy over there, that guy's a leader.
Just the quiet, unassuming leadership style. Yeah. That works too. But there's no type of any leadership. Yeah. Like there's none.
So we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth there at the Gator Diamond Pod. We'll be shooting that tomorrow, and hopefully you all be getting it here on Wednesday morning. Plenty of time to get recapped on what took place, see what we're going, and a preview of Arkansas and what we think. And even still, go ahead.
I was going to say, and we'll have the FSU result at the time that we're recording.
That's right.
So before we sign off, I do want to make one comment before that game starts. You got to get at least one game this week. You cannot go 0-4 this week. You absolutely – or I know it's a long season. I know that a lot of things can change. I know Florida went from 1-11 in the SEC to 15-15 and almost hosted a regional last year. You go 0-4 this week, this team could check out.
Well, what I was going to say too, real quick, was that even with getting swept on this weekend, being 3-3 in the SEC, that just puts you one game behind the leaders in the SEC. So it just goes to show you the type of season it's going to be in the SEC. I don't think that there's any great teams that's going to run away with this. So I think there's going to be a lot of losses throughout the SEC every weekend, and you just got to get hot.
Agree, but you cannot take multiple sweeps in SEC.
Oh no, of course not.
You cannot take it. Or if you're going to, you at the very least need to at least be able to point over. Yeah, see that ACC? Yeah, we dominate that conference. We beat Miami twice. Now we have a series win over FSU as well. So you can at least hang your hat on that. But maybe we are 13-17 in the SEC, but it's the SEC. And when we step out of conference play, we dominate everyone else. So we should still be in the NCAA tournament. That's what I'm saying. You cannot go 0-4 this week. Or I hate to say it, especially in March of a college baseball season that runs through May in the regular season and then goes into June for the postseason. So I hate to say this in March, but you go 0-4 this week, you might be sunk. Brutal reality, but you got to get one. You've got to get one this week. So as our show eclipses the hour mark, I think that's a good place to leave off. We've got to do something in baseball to make ourselves feel good about some men's sport. Obviously, the women are doing some good things. The ladies taking care of business in softball, beating Tennessee 2 out of 3. Tennessee was the number 1 ranked team in the country, so that's something to feel good about. Gymnastics winning the Southeastern Conference Championship. That's great too, but the guys got to do something to step it up and pick up the slack where the Gator basketball team left it off, unfortunately to say. But until next time, y'all, Adrian Perez, Neil Shulman signing off. We're wearing black because it's a funeral, but better days are ahead. I do believe Todd Golden is the guy. You've talked about in no shortage of detail, Adrian, how you think we've got us one in Todd Golden. I share that opinion. I do believe the Gators will be back in all kinds of weather. We all stick together for Florida. The sun will come up sometime, somewhere behind those dark, dark clouds that are currently over Gators athletics.